time about how I'm in love with my sister's boyfriend and I think he likes me too. Actually, no. I know so because he kissed me 3 days ago. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. The story I'm about to tell you guys is pretty bad, so please don't come at me in the comments. I swear I'm a good girl. A little backstory, my sister and I have never really gotten along. She's 3 years older than me and thinks she's the queen of the house. And she's always seen me as competition, which I hate. My mom would always try to make us get along, but it was totally impossible. My sister was always upset at something I did. Eventually, I stopped trying with my sister and I wouldn't make any effort to make her like me. Finally, last year she moved out and I was so happy. We celebrated my 20th birthday at home last year, and of course my sister came over. But she brought this really cute boy with her. Let me tell you guys, it was instant love at first sight. I can't even explain what I felt, I just knew that I liked him. Even my mom made a comment about how good looking he was. And can I just say that I caught him staring at me a few times throughout the dinner. After that, I never really saw him because my sister and I never hung out. Until my sister lost her job because of COVID and had to move back in with us. And this meant that I was seeing her boyfriend a lot more around our house. He was so nice to me. Anytime they wanted to watch a movie, he would always invite me. If they were going to go out to eat or go to the beach, he would always invite me. Eventually, I started saying yes, well, because I liked him. And something told me that he liked me too. And yes, I know it's totally wrong, but I just couldn't help myself. Whenever I knew he was going to come over, I would dress up and look really cute. I also had a pool in the backyard, so I would make sure I was in a bikini whenever he came over. I know this sounds bad, but it's gonna get worse. Well, guess what? Around this time, my sister actually got COVID. Thankfully, she didn't get really sick, but she was a little bit under the weather. And of course, she had to quarantine. So she basically stayed in her room and we all were on the other side of the house. Of course, her boyfriend, let's call him Mark. Mark would come over and bring her food sometimes. On one of these occasions, he asked me if I wanted to go to the beach with him and his friends the following day. He knew that I was totally bored because of quarantine, so I said yes. And guess what? He didn't tell my sister that he asked me and I didn't tell her that I said yes. So it was our little secret. The following day, I wore my sexiest bikini and we had a great time at the beach with his friends. While we were at the beach with his friends, I could tell that he kept staring at me. And he caught me staring at him too a couple of times. When we drove back to our house, he made a comment about how good I looked in the bikini. That's when I told him that he looked really good too. From then on, we started flirting all the time, making little comments, staring at each other, and he also started following me on Instagram. So I got to work posting sexy stories all the time, and it totally worked because he would reply to them. That's when I sent him a naughty picture. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm in love with my sister's boyfriend and he likes me too because he kissed me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So after flirting back and forth through DM, I finally sent him a cute naughty picture. I mean, not so naughty, but a little naughty. And that's when he sent me one back. Then he sent me a text message saying that he wished he had met me before he met my sister. And I told him I felt the exact same way. The following day, he came to visit my sister like he usually did. My sister had COVID at the time, so he would come every single day. At this point, my sister's quarantine was almost over. So I knew I either had to act fast or talk to him and tell him that we couldn't take things further. My parents had decided to go to our lake house, so I knew I had the house all to myself. And my sister couldn't come out of her room, so he and I were basically alone in the house. That's when he asked me if we could talk. We went to the backyard so that my sister wouldn't hear us, and he confessed that he really liked me, but he didn't know how to feel about it. He also told me he felt really guilty, and I totally understood him. He asked me what I thought we should do, and I just didn't have an answer. We just stared at each other for a second, and then he kissed me. And it was the most magical kiss of my entire life. We then proceeded to make out for about 10 minutes. After that, he told me we needed to make a decision. I told him the best thing for us to do was to just be honest with my sister. We went straight to my sister's room and told her everything. Of course, my sister being the drama queen that she is, she started throwing things around in her room, and she called my parents and told them everything. Mark got on the phone with my parents and told them that he was responsible for everything, but that he couldn't lie to my sister and that he had to be honest. And yeah, I felt even harder when he said that. That's when my sister had the bright idea to lie and say that she was pregnant and that he had to get married with her. Mark hesitated but said if that was true, then yes, they would get married. I told my sister I didn't believe her and that she needed to provide a pregnancy test. Mark went and got the pregnancy test, and of course, it came back negative. Mark went home and I got on the phone with my parents, and I told them that I would step aside for my sister's happiness. My parents told me that they thought it was the best thing. So I called Mark and told him that he needed to stay with my sister. Now my sister is trash talking me to all her friends, which I expected and I guess I deserve. But should I sacrifice my happiness and his? My sister won't let Mark and I talk at all. When he comes over, I completely ignore him. What should I do, you guys? Help. Story time about how my date turned out to be a serial killer. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I recently got promoted at my job and had to move to a new city. I didn't know anyone in this new city, so I decided to sign up for some dating apps. Within a few days, I was already talking to some guys. One of them in particular was really nice, and I could tell he was really trying to get to know me. So I gave him my phone number. From there, we texted for about a full week. He would say good morning and good night. He would always ask me questions and act like he was just really interested in me. I decided that I really liked him and I told him. That's when he asked me if I wanted to go on a date, and of course, I said yes. We decided to meet up for dinner during the weekend. On the morning of the date, I sent him a text message saying good morning. I didn't hear anything back from him. At first, I thought maybe he's just stuck at work. An hour before the date, I still hadn't heard from him, so I decided to send him a text, and he did not reply. So of course, I ended up going to dinner by myself anyway. But when I got home, I had a message from him apologizing for standing me up. When I asked him what happened, he told me that he got stuck at work. And I decided to believe him. I had no reason not to trust him. I decided to give him a second chance when he asked me out again. The following weekend, we decided to have a picnic. But same thing, a few hours before the date, I still hadn't heard from him. That's when I sent him a message asking him if he was going to show up or not. And I didn't hear anything from him for a few hours. Finally, he messaged me once again saying that he got stuck at work. He begged me for another chance, and I said yes. A few days later on the news, I saw that 2 women had disappeared after going on a date with some guy. And both of the women had disappeared in the area that I lived in. When I told my parents about it, they urged me not to go on any dates. So I decided not to tell them that I actually had a date that week. The following day, we meet at the restaurant. As soon as I see him, he's really sweaty and nervous. And when he hugged me, he smelled really bad. As in B.O. I didn't want to judge him, but I asked him if he was okay. That's when he told me that he'd been working every single day nonstop. Then I look at his fingernails and they're full of dirt and what seemed like some red stuff. I asked him what he did for work again, and you'll never guess what he said. He said he was in murders and acquisitions. Then he laughed. This is where it gets scary. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my date turned out to be a serial unaliver. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. On the date, I noticed that his fingernails were dirty, he was really sweaty, and he smelled really bad. When I asked him what he did again for a living, he told me he was in murders and acquisitions. Then he started laughing maniacally. He told me it was a joke and it was a line from one of his favorite movies, American Psycho. I tried to laugh it off with him, but I just couldn't get past his whole demeanor. Then he started just doing bizarre things. He ordered tons of food, steak, chicken, pasta, nachos, salad, and he ate all of it. But the way he was eating was so aggressive, it was like he hadn't eaten in days. By the way, at this point, we hadn't followed each other on social media. So I told him I wanted to go to the bathroom. When I got to the bathroom, I started looking up his Instagram. He had a profile, but not many pictures on it. Then I started looking through his tagged pictures, but again, nothing. It was like he didn't exist outside of the dating app. I decided I'd stay for the date, but then I wouldn't speak to him again. When I got back to the table, he started asking me a lot of questions. Like, did I live by myself? Have I ever shot any weapons? I mean, what kind of question is that on a first date? Then out of nowhere, he asked me if I wanted to go to his lake house. He quickly pulled up his phone and showed me a few pictures. I finally asked him again what he did for a living. He told me that his parents are very wealthy and they own several ranches, and that he basically did all the marketing for them. Then he abruptly ended the date. I mean, trust me, I wanted to go home anyway, but it's the way he did it. I told him I probably wouldn't have time to go to the lake house. Then he called a server over and gave them his black card, which is a pretty good indication if someone has money. Then he went to the bathroom. At this point, I just wanted to make a run for it. He comes back out, grabs his card from the server, and tells me good night. As we're walking out of the restaurant, he stops me and tries to kiss me. Of course, I turned my face away. Then he said, "Ah, you're a fighter, aren't ya?" He then got in his car and simply drove away without saying a word. The following day on the news, I hear about another missing woman. Part 3 is up. Part 2 of how my date turned out to be a serial unaliver. Disclaimers is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. If you haven't seen part 2, go watch it. The following day, I hear that another woman is missing. This is when they showed a description of the man they think kidnapped the women, and it looked exactly like my date. They even mentioned the dating app that he used, which is the same one we met on. So I decided that after work, I would go to the police myself. I spoke to the detective and gave him all the information. His name, his social media, his dating profile, and I even told him about how he behaved on the first date. Later on that night, I got home and blocked him from everything. 2 days later, the police show up to my job and told me that they caught him. And when they went to search his lake house, they found the missing women. Apparently, he would lure women to his lake house and keep them there for days, eventually unaliving them. The police told me that if I hadn't followed my instincts, I might have ended up like they did. He's now in maximum prison, and somehow he managed to send me a letter. I burnt it as soon as I got it.